I'm going to put this up on the channel so that it's there if anybody wants to watch it later. And we'll get started here in just a minute. But we're obviously running a little late first night. So. I have no idea if everybody's back up. Is everybody from downstairs? Do you know? Yeah, I think we were like the last ones. Okay, well, they can wander in as we figure it out. Okay, everybody. Thank you all for coming tonight. What I want to use this time to do is, so I just want to introduce you to what your kids are going to be learning in that end of the building, and not only that, what we're going to be learning on Sunday. So this is not a replacement of Sunday. I actually have written the sermon already to make sure I don't tell you tonight what I'm going to tell you on Sunday. So you have to come Sunday to get the whole story. But this will be kind of a background information, and the reason we wanted to go to this model was because even under the best case scenario where you got the best sermon ever and everything has gone great, that's still only one time I get to teach you a passage of scripture. So now I'm going to get 2 bites at it, and then the Sunday school teachers, they're going to get a shot at it. So by the time we get to noon on Sunday, you guys are going to be the world's utmost authority on Jonah chapter 1. That's the plan. So it's our hope to get us to that point. So we are going to take a look at this, and again, this will be the same passage we're going to look at on Sunday. Now, usually we will get started right at 6 o'clock. Obviously tonight, with being the first night, we had a little. Getting started was a little slow. But normally what will happen is this time will last from 6 to 6:30. At 6:30, we've got a couple of small group opportunities for you. Dr. Nutt introduced the first one. He's going to be taking a kind of a second level approach. So if you want to continue the discussion, we're going to start here. You're going to go with Dr. Nutt up to room 200 up across the office. He'll show you where it's at. So he's going to take a group there and do that. And then we've got all 3 of the children's groups down there. So if you want to go down and help with the preschoolers, the 1st through 4th graders, the 5th and 6th graders, or the high schoolers at 6:30. Again, probably going to be a little late tonight. But normally, if you want to go up there, and don't tell me I'm not qualified to teach because I done just taught you what they're going to be talking about. So you're going to know you're going to know more than they're going to know because they're not going to have done it yet by the time you get there. So any small group work you're going to do, you're going to be very familiar with the story because I will have just taught it to you. And then when we come back on Sunday, we're going to get kind of the second level. Okay, so what does it mean? Here's what it is. Now we want to know what it means. Okay? Nod your head like this if you're still with me. Okay, got that? Good. Please don't stare at me with those blank faces all night because I will be asleep by 6:30 if you do. All right. So we're going to be looking at Jonah chapter 1. If you guys have Bibles or you want to open up your app or whatever, we can look at that, or I'm going to read it to you too. Either way is fine. And we're going to be looking at chapter 1. Now, verse 1. The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. All right, who is that? Well, I did a little checking this week as to who Jonah is. He's mentioned a number of times in the New Testament. Jesus actually talks about Jonah quite a bit in the New Testament, which we will get to later. But Jonah is only mentioned one time in the Bible in the Old Testament outside of the book of Jonah, which I didn't know that till about 4 hours ago. And where he's mentioned that, and you can write this down unless you're willing to trust me, this is 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25, a very popular book of the Bible, right? 2 Kings. But here's what it says. Now I want you to listen very closely. Actually, let me give you a little context. 2 Kings chapter 14 is a list of, hey, here's a bunch of kings who did awful things and they all died. I mean, that's essentially what 2 Kings 14 is. No good news. Everything is bad. All the kings have sinned. All of them have messed up. All of them across the line. Blah, blah, blah. Typical things for the Old Testament. So he's mentioned in this verse, 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25. Jeroboam the second recovered the territories of Israel between Lebo Hamath and the Dead Sea, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had promised through Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-hepher. Gath-hepher. Anybody ever heard of that town before? That's where Jonah's from. Fascinating thing about this. What did God promise through Jonah that I just read? What did I say? What was going to happen? I'll read it to you again. Jeroboam II recovered the territories of Israel between Lebo Hamath and the Dead Sea, just as the Lord promised through Jonah. So what did God promise through Jonah according to this verse? Exactly. This area, wherever Lebo Hamath is and wherever the Dead Sea is, there's an area between, and you're going to recover that as Jonah said you would. Question. In the book of Jonah, does Jonah ever make any prediction about anybody recovering land? You're all like, dude, we're only on verse 1. How can I know? Anybody ever read it before? And the answer is no. Now, I find that to be very interesting because Jonah's entire prophecy here is judgment, which we're going to get to in a second. He never mentions anything about recovering land, yet in 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25, the scribe there makes a notation that Jeroboam II, whoever that is going to recover this land because God spoke through Jonah and said he would. And not just anybody named Jonah, but Jonah, the son of Amittai. We know it's the same guy because it's basically be like Tim Benjamin is more specific than just Tim. So it's not just somebody named Jonah, but it's this particular guy named Jonah. So what that tells me is Jonah had a bigger career than the fish. Bigger career than Nineveh, bigger career than judgment and hellfire and brimstone and damnation and all that other stuff. He had a bigger career than that. He obviously said more stuff. I don't know what any of it is outside of apparently we're going to recover this land between Lebo Hamath and the Dead Sea. But I'm just telling you this to say this wasn't Jonah's first rodeo. Or at least it wasn't his first, or it might not have been his last. I'm not sure where this is in the order. But at some point, Jonah had a bigger career than this. All I know about it is 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 25. So I put that out there to say Jonah was not just a one-hit wonder. Again, we don't know. Because Jonah is standalone. So we don't know when his story happened in the midst of everything else. Based on the historical context. Okay. Verse 2. Okay, well, let's start back in verse 1. Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are. Okay, so you've got a couple of different places here. God comes to Jonah and says, all right, Jonah, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go pronounce judgment against this place because I have looked at it and it's bad. Really bad. And so Jonah, verse 3. But Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. And he went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. He bought a ticket, went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. All right, let me give you a couple of notations. Where do all these things happen? First of all, the city that 2 Kings says he was from, this place called, let me read it off my paper here, when I say it was Gath-hepher, which I'm sure I'm not saying that right. That's where he's from, hometown. Like, I'm from Alger, so that was his hometown. If you look at a map, that town was right next to a port city called Joppa, which is mentioned here. So God comes to Jonah, assuming he's at home when this happens. Again, we don't know that, but I'm assuming that's where he's at. Says, I want you to go do this very specific thing. Jonah's like, I'll get right on that. And he starts walking. He goes to the next town over. So basically, if he was in St. Mary's, he would have went to Walpock. He gets to the next town over, and he buys a ticket on a boat going to a place called Tarshish. Now, let me give you a little bit of context about what kind of distance we're talking about. So if Joppa is here, okay, so the Gath-hamath place is here. Joppa's here. They're right next, very, very close together. Nineveh is 500 miles from there. 500 miles, to give you kind of a spatial thing, is the distance between here and Philadelphia. Been a pretty good walk, considering it wasn't like Jonah was going to go jump in his Ferrari and drive that in a day or two, okay? It would have been a significant investment for him to travel that far over land, 500 miles. So that's where God asked him to go, is 500 miles inland toward Nineveh. We're told specifically he goes to Joppa, he buys a ticket on a boat going to Tarshish. Now, where's Tarshish? If you look at that, Tarshish is another port city on the opposite end of the body of water that's there, 2,500 miles away. So that place would be like going from here to San Francisco. Okay? You know anything about geography, you know those are two very different distances. And so that's where he went. So he's running a long way away. So basically, it would be like God coming to one of you St. Marysians here tonight and saying, I want you to go to Philadelphia and you go buy a plane ticket for San Francisco. Okay? You're going entirely the wrong direction. So does that kind of help with the distance that we're talking about? Now, having said that, he probably would have had about the same amount of time traveling, because Tarshish is entirely by boat. So he would have been riding in the boat the whole way, depending on the currents and the wind pattern and whatever else. May have been the same amount of time, but the distance is way different. So 2,500 miles. Interesting note about Tarshish. Tarshish was located on what would be the border of what we today would know as Spain. And Spain would have been kind of the vast wilderness, okay? It's where people go to disappear, where criminals will go when they're running from the law and that kind of stuff. It would have been kind of the frontiers country, something like that. Basically, if you're going there, you're not intending to come back. That was his plan. So just to give you some idea what kind of problems he's having. Okay. Verse 4. But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. One of the things the people of the ancient world had, and again, I'm going to do my best to try to help you comprehend this, but it's hard for us to understand this. One of the greatest fears of a person who lived in this time period was water. Water was the scariest thing you could think of, because everything in your life, I mean, you lived and died on a couple of different levels based on access to water. I mean, look around the table. How many water bottles are sitting on this table, on tables right now, right? Half of you here got one, and mine's just not where you can see it. Didn't happen in the ancient world. The idea that I could walk in that kitchen right now and turn on the sink or open the refrigerator and grab one of those plastic bottles and drink it, no, didn't happen. People died of all kinds of bacterial infections and things. Water was a very difficult thing to come by just to drink. But then you add to that, water was also the thing you used for cleansing. And again, cleansing, not like we think of, where I've had one shower today and I'm probably going to have another one before I go to bed. That's not how that worked at all. It was like, I have an infection, therefore I need to wash kind of stuff. So any kind of bathing you're going to do, you had to have water for that. Crops, not a farmer, but I tell you right now, crops don't grow too well without water. So if the rains don't come in the right quantities at the right time, your food don't grow. The trees don't grow. They don't produce anything. Your animals all die. And then on top of that, most of your transportation had to do with water. And if water didn't cooperate, meaning too much, too little, too stormy, too whatever, everything in your life was controlled by your access to water. Something that we don't think about, because think about your house where you live right now. How many different knobs in your house can you turn and get access to water that is 100% safe? How many you got? 7, 8, 10, 12? I mean, how many are there in there? But by the standards that they had at this time, your garden hose in the backyard would have been a modern marvel, because water would have come out of that thing just by turning the knob, which would have been a crazy idea for people of this time. So water was something they were very, very frightened of. Also understand, if water was deeper than what you could see the bottom, who knows what's down there? We have many passages in the Bible. I could point some out to you where we talk about sea monsters and sea creatures and things. Because what's a whale? What's a dolphin? What's a shark? Any of that stuff could be in there. So stormy seas, all stuff. So what they are encountering, what the original readers of the book of Jonah would read this is like, oh my word, a storm so bad they think they're going to capsize. Lots and lots of boats went out and never came back. Because it wasn't like they could put up a distress signal or do a mayday or do a SOS. None of that existed. You got in trouble, you sank, period. That's the end of the story. So this would have been an incredibly frightening thing for the passengers on this boat. Also remember, we're told earlier in this passage, Jonah didn't go and say, hey, here, seasoned fishermen, can I jump in with you guys and travel this 2,500 miles? No. It says he bought a ticket. These are not seasoned water people. Some of them may have been. But it's not like he's on with a crew of guys who know what the heck they're doing in the middle of a storm. He's on with a bunch of passengers who may or may not know what they're doing. Just don't know. So this is a very dangerous situation. Everybody's afraid. Verse 5. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their gods for help and threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship. Again, that's all they would have known how to do. We got to lighten the load, and they threw things over because, look, if we capsize, all this food we brought with us is useless anyways. We might as well get rid of it and see if we can keep the boat on top of the water. Okay, but all this time, Jonah was sound asleep down in the hold. What does that tell you? What do we have here? Any theory? Why would he be asleep when everybody else is terrified for their lives? He doesn't care. This is a man who has given up. Now, how did he get to that point? It's not like an armed soldier with a spear to the back of his head forced him onto that boat. He made a choice. Tells me he knew he made a mistake. And we're going to see that illustrated even clearer as we work through chapter 1. He knew he was not where he was supposed to be. Where was he supposed to be? Oh, about 500 miles that direction. But that's not where he was. He knew it, and he gave up on life because of that. So he's down there sleeping, thinking, I guess might as well enter the afterlife rested, I guess. I'm not sure that's a great strategy, but that's what he decided. So the captain went down after him. How can you sleep at a time like this, he shouted. Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives. How many of you don't think that's what the captain said? What do you think the captain actually said? Get your fanny out there and help us save the boat. That's exactly what he said, okay? And that's the church version of it. There's another version of it he probably said that I'm not going to say here, okay? Captain, probably very clear. For multiple reasons. It's bad for business if your boat sinks. Not to mention the fact, I don't want all these dead people here either, but okay, so the captain says, get out there and help. What are you doing? Then the crew cast lots, and we've talked about that before. Casting lots was simply a way of determining the outcome. So they cast lots, and obviously Jonah came up. They cast lots to see which of them had offended the gods and caused the terrible storm. When they did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. What a big surprise. Verse 8. Now listen to this series of questions. And you can imagine it probably went, this is the G-rated version, but it probably went a lot like this. Why has this awful storm come down on us? They demanded. Who are you? What is your line of work? What country are you from? What is your nationality? Spill the beans, pal. If you're the reason that this is happening, we want to know a little about you. So they come at him with all these questions. Verse 9. Jonah answered, I am a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. Okay, so when you see Lord, I'm assuming your translation has capital L, capital O, capital R, the official name of God there. So, and this is somebody the sailors obviously recognize. Verse 10. The sailors were terrified when they heard this, for he had already told them he was running away from the Lord. That right there is the prime sentence. We learn a lot in that. Okay? based on the reaction of the people who are interrogating him, what do they know about him? What do they know about him? What has he already told them? It says right there that he's running from God, right? They already know that. Yet they did not know he was a Hebrew or who the God was that he served. Didn't know any of that, but they knew he was running from God. Doesn't that seem interesting? In all the small talk and the chit chat that we're having in the boat, getting ready to go, he says, guys, you're not going to believe this. I'm running from God. He was willing to tell them that because he already said that before anything had happened. They might not have even shoved off yet. And he's already admitting, I am here because I'm running from God. And I'm sure, look, I've been around a bunch of guys, as many of you men have. Yeah, we all yucked it up over that till the storm started and we got scared and thought maybe this wasn't the best idea we ever had. He was willing to tell them he was running from God, but he never made any mention about who his God was. I'm going to call that a symptom of people who are living in rebellion to God. They're not going to identify who God is. They're not going to give credence to who God is. They're not going to worship God. But they'll be the first to tell you, I'm running from God, almost as a sense of pride. And you've seen people who act that way. He was willing to tell them that, but he wasn't willing to tell them about this God he's running from. Verse 10. The sailors were terrified when they heard this, for he already told them they were running from God. Oh, why did you do it? They groaned. Groaned? I feel like they would not have groaned that. I feel like that would have been shouted. Verse 11. Since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked him, what should we do to stop this storm? I made a note in the margin here to say, look, buddy, you broke it, you bought it. All right, you caused it. How do we fix it? You're the one responsible for what's happening here. We want to know, how do we get out of this, because we're not interested in sinking with this ship. Verse 11. Throw me into the sea, Jonah said, and it will become calm again. I know this terrible storm is all my fault. He could just jump overboard. He could. Why do you think he told them that? I mean, if his presence on the boat is that much of a problem, that it's going to get everybody killed, I mean, that seems to be what we're heading toward. If that's the problem, why didn't he just do a swan dive off the side? Why did he not do that? And I would say, I have a theory about that we're going to come back to. Keep that thought in mind. Why didn't you just jump? And I'm going to come back to that. Verse 13. Instead, the sailors rowed even harder to get the ship to the land, but the stormy sea was too violent for them. They couldn't make it. I mean, even the sailors care more about Jonah than Jonah does. They're trying to save the guy. They're thinking maybe if we can get closer to land or get somewhere, we can, try to get out of this. But so they're actually caring more about Jonah than Jonah is. Verse 14, and they cried out to the Lord, Jonah's God. Oh, Lord, they pleaded, don't make us die for this man's sin, and don't hold us responsible for his death, O Lord. You have sent this storm upon him for your own good reasons. And the sailors picked Jonah up and threw him into the raging sea, and the storm stopped at once. And the soldiers were awestruck by the Lord's great power. They offered him a sacrifice and vowed to serve him. I mean, don't want to give Jonah too much credit here, but he does convert the passengers on this boat. Impressive. Not sure that's the way I would ever want to convert somebody, but, to each their own. I believe that the reason Jonah didn't just jump off the edge of the boat is Jonah is simply being consistent. Jonah doesn't care. Jonah's main sin in this is apathy. Because the first thing is, he doesn't care about Nineveh. We see later, he doesn't care about himself. And we find out even a little later, he doesn't even care about the other passengers on the boat. He's a guy struck with apathy. And that's he keeps demonstrating that the whole way across. Okay, so Jonah goes overboard. And then we get verse 17. Now the Lord had arranged, we're going to come back to that word arranged for a fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay. You have Jonah, you have the sailors, you have the fish, and you have Nineveh. Okay, that's the I'm calling those the four major characters. You have Jonah, you have the sailors, the passengers on the boat, you have the fish, and you have Nineveh. God came to Jonah and said, I want you to help all these people. Jonah said, no. You know, for whatever reason, he never says why. I just don't care. So he runs the other way. By doing so, he leaves Nineveh in ignorance. He leaves the sailors frightened because as Jonah is splashing down, the last thing that Jonah knows about these passengers is they're terrified. He doesn't know anything else after that because what happens after he hits the water, no one knows. So the sailors remain frightened, and the fish is going to have the worst case of indigestion for 3 days. Okay? Everybody is affected by what Jonah does here. God goes to Jonah and says, I have something it's pretty specific. Go to this specific place at this specific time and say this specific thing. And Jonah's like, pass. And by doing so, Jonah now makes everybody around him miserable. He drags everybody down with him. And at the end of the day, by the way the story's told, he doesn't care. Jonah's major attribute is his own apathy. The reason the story continues going the way it does is because Jonah just doesn't care. And that's not exactly an endearing way of looking at Jonah. And if you've read the book of Jonah, you know it's only going to get worse as we go through the story. But the idea is here is God and Jonah are having an argument about why he should care. And we'll see who wins. Questions about chapter 1? Y'all feel prepared? All right. So here's your options. Dr. Nuts right here. He's gonna be like Moses, and he's going to lead down the hallway to room 200. Any of you who want to continue the discussion about application, he's going to take you out and do that. You're welcome to go downstairs. Brandy is down there with the 5th and 6th graders, and Missy is down there with the preschoolers. You're welcome to go work with them. Don is upstairs with the teenagers. For those of you who are brave, are welcome to go there. And for anybody else, I have a specific job for Sunday that I need done that I want to train somebody to do right now. So I'm not even going to tell you what it is. So those are it. If you want to go to any of those things, Dr. Nuts walking out now. Huh? I said Andrea, didn't I? Oh, I said Missy. I meant Andrea. When I said Missy, I meant Andrea. They're downstairs. So go. Don't be apathetic. Don't be like Jonah. Go.